Hi all, my name is AJ.
And this is Courtney.
And we're with the Oceans Books and Stuff channel.
Today we are going to be starting a new series talking about the comparisons between books and their movies or their TV shows that came out with them.
We thought it'd be a really good idea to start off this series with something that we actually just finished really recently, and that series is A Series of Unfortunate Events. Today we're going to be comparing it to the TV Netflix adaptation. We're not going to be really talking about the old Nickelodeon Jim Carrey movie that came out over a decade ago. We're just going to be mostly focusing on the TV show. I do want to give a quick side note. The last time I have read all 13 books was about 2 years ago, so I might be a little foggy on the last 2 books.
And I just finished reading them the beginning of last year, so almost exactly a year ago, but that's not saying much because I tend to forget things kind of quickly, which is something that I need to figure out a system to help me not forget so much. So we'll see how much I remember as well.
And then just one last, I guess you can call it a warning. We won't be talking about too many spoilers in regards to the differences between the book and the TV show. We'll keep all those like a surprise, like we really do urge that you go watch it. In regards to any kind of spoilers with the books, we may delve into some of that because the books are, over 15 years old now, so we're not too scared if it was in the publication, so just be aware of that. So we're gonna go ahead and start right off. So what were your overall thoughts with like the TV show?
It kind of changed over time. So when we first started watching it, I was like, okay, this is really cool, I'm so excited for this. And then I realized how it is pretty different. I feel like the tone kind of is a little different, and so I wasn't sure how I was liking it so much. And then once we finished it with the last couple of episodes, I was like, wow, I really like the way that they went with these. And so overall, I really liked the way they did it.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I don't think I was really... I thought that I wasn't going to like it as much, just based off of like the first episode or two. I just like something really felt off to me, but it was more as the TV show progressed. I actually really liked it a whole lot, and like what you were saying, it was this last season that just came out a few days ago. It's 3 seasons, by the way. I really liked it. So the first season does cover the first 4 books, the second season covers the next 5, and then the third season does cover the last 4. So I was actually impressed that I was only a little iffy on the show, only for the first couple of episodes. What are your thoughts with like the whole book series? Like, because I mean, I guess we should kind of get that out of the way of like our whole feelings on the books, all 13 books.
Well, since the first time that I read them was when I was in elementary school, and I really liked them at that time because like I was just starting to read, and so I only had a couple series that my mom was actually buying me to have for myself, and I was one of them. And whenever other people that would read faster than me would try to talk about it around me, I'd be like, do not spoil this for me. And because I cared about the book, so I didn't want it to be spoiled for me. So I really liked it a lot, and was always interested to see what was going to happen next. And reading them again last year, it's just so easy to read them. It's so easy to get through them because the way they're written is very simple, and each book has their new adventure. Some of them are more interesting than others, for sure. I really like the first ones because they introduce you to what's going on. The one that I remember the least amount is like the 4th one where they're at the lumber mill. Like that one didn't stick with me as much. I really liked the carnival one because I just thought that was so cool, being at carnival. And I really liked the last one because they were on an island and it was completely different than like anything else they'd done. Once they started getting away from Mr. Poe and started doing,
branching off,
like, yeah, kind of being
themselves
on their own, and they're totally, besides I guess Olaf's with them, but they're pretty much as far as they can be from anyone else that they may have known in any of the other books. So I like that too.
Yeah, that's actually how I was too. It was actually one of the very few books that was purchased for me because I was like, it was when I was still living in Indiana, so I was maybe like 7 or 8. I actually remember it was my aunt who actually bought the first 2 books for me. I still have them over there on the bookshelf. I really thought it was cool because I'm gonna pull open the last book. So this wasn't the one that I was given. Obviously, this is the last one. But I really liked having and owning a book series that made me feel a little bit like way more mature. Because of the binding and everything. So like you have like the frilled pages, you have like the hardcover with the design and everything. And honestly, just owning those first 2 books just made me feel really cool. Reading them though, growing up, I don't remember reading them all. I stopped somewhere. I honestly think it was the last 2 books that I stopped at, which is why I'm not too familiar with those ones as much. I've read them both because growing up, I remember reading all of them up to Grim Grotto, which is what, the 11th one?
No.
That's the 11th one, because that's the one right before the penultimate one. And I remember, I don't necessarily remember why I stopped reading them. I think it's just because I was barely getting into high school and I just kind of stopped. Like I just got out of that phase of reading them. So it was kind of a cool thing to go back and reread them 2 years ago. So yeah, it was a really cool thing to start, to finish it. That's why I really liked 2 years ago. I just wanted to restart the series because on Goodreads, when I first started Goodreads back in 2014, I actually have a habit of not going back and rating the books that I've read within like my life. I've just rated books that I've started as of joining Goodreads. That's why I actually wanted to rate the books on there, because I thought it would just be a fun thing to reread all of them back to back and then just give my perspective on it. I remember that I gave almost all of them 4 stars, except for a few of them I did give 5 stars, and those ones, my favorites, because you said yours was the Carnival one, that one wasn't one of my favorites. It was a good one, but my favorites were The Vile Village. That one was the very first one that just really stood out to me, which is kind of like an unpopular opinion. I feel like that one a whole lot of people don't like. I actually personally like that one a lot just because that one started to feel way more, I don't want to say grim, but like it felt darker and more mature. One of the scenes that actually stands out to me is when they get stuck in the jail cell and they end up realizing that like it's Klaus's birthday, and in the book it's just like, wow, like it's super sad. I actually remember tearing up because it's just like, because birthdays aren't necessarily like my favorite, just like growing up and stuff, so it kind of hit really hard just knowing that these kids are going through so much crap, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, you know what, like so much crap is happening that we didn't even remember it's your birthday. So that one's my personal one of my personal favorites. I also really like the last one, and then another one that I really like is Grim Grotto. Those are the ones that stand out to me.
Yeah, I remember when my mom bought them, the 10th and the 10th to the 13th one, they were all like so much bigger, and I had the fancy copies like that one that had the cool paper and everything. And so I remember just by the looks that those were my favorite ones, by the way they felt and the way that the seriousness of the cover started getting.
Were those the only ones that you owned that were like that?
I think so, because I think the rest of them were paperback, and it was just 10, 11, 12, 13.
Because you have the paperback ones, and I don't like those ones as much, because I really do like I like these ones, because they're really cool, they just feel cool, and honestly, oddly enough, I only owned the first 2, and then number 5, like 1, 2, and then a skip to 5. I didn't own 3 or 4, for some odd reason. Like my mom just never really bought us books, so it's just whatever was like gifted to us. Getting into the differences between the books and the Netflix series, I was actually not that bothered by the differences. So without going into spoilers or anything, when we first started watching the first season, what did you think of the whole subplot with like the backstory of the 2 characters that weren't in the book? Like where they're kind of on a journey.
Oh.
So like the twist, I guess you can say.
Yeah, so at first I was mad. Because I was like, what are these characters doing in here? And what are they doing with my series that I love to read? They're messing it up. And then of course you find out at the end why they did it, and you're like, oh, it's brilliant. But at the time we were like, stop.
Yeah, because like I remember at the end of the first episode, we were just like, why the crap are these people in the show? Because if you've read the books, like you'll obviously know like why we're kind of like why we were bothered. But as it was progressing, I will say this like right now, I'm pretty good at like catching on to like the big twist by the end. But honestly, that one caught me off guard throughout the whole entire season. So that right off the bat was pretty cool. I think that actually starts me off with the thought of, I'm actually really glad that with any kind of differences that they didn't take away from the essence of the series. It never felt like the writers of the show or like the producers of the show didn't care about like the main material. Like I feel like that they respected it enough to keep it really the same, but tweak it enough to where it's fresh for like viewers and like fresh for like the readers coming back into the show. I really thought that was interesting. What did you think about? Because this actually bothered me a tiny bit, and this is actually like probably one of my only critiques on the TV series. Sometimes the acting was not bad, but it was more like the dialogue felt super. What's the word? You know how like whenever you're rehearsing for like a Shakespeare play, and like it doesn't feel natural, like those words, because like nobody talks like that. It kind of gave me like that feeling to where whenever like anybody in the show, whenever they were talking, I'm just like, people don't talk like that in real life. So that was like my only thing that I didn't really like. Did that ever get to you?
No, I don't think I caught that too much.
Yeah.
Maybe I did, and I just don't remember. Like for me, sometimes some of the backstories of different characters, I was kind of like, this wasn't really in the book, and so those kind of things would catch me up a little bit. But then I've started to mature my thinking when it comes to books versus their other styles. So whenever they make it into a movie or a show or something, like a lot of times, especially when I was younger, and even with this show a little bit, I was like, that did not happen, that happened in a different area of the time, like things were different, and it would be more of like a negative feeling, like why they do that. But now, especially with the end of the season that we just watched, I started to appreciate it more, where you have to kind of look at it like it's not the same as the book. It's a version of the book. And so some things don't translate well from book to movie because it's just people's thoughts or like narrative or something to where it's not going to go both ways.
And that actually, so like right before we started recording the video, I pulled the last book that we own. So this is the end, and I was reading, and I actually, this is why like it's not that good of like of a thing to be bothered about. But when it comes down to like the dialogue, when I was reading like the dialogue in here, when you read it out loud, like it actually reads like they say it in like the shows. They're like, we have to go after them. We may be their only chance, Violet said. Or there's a part where we can't go after them. We have to help Kit. And then Sunny's just like, split up.
I did the same exact thing. I looked at it and to see if any of it was the same. And there's a part with Olaf in it where he's like, oh, we better go get him to help us because we can't help Kit because she's too heavy. He's like, they abandoned us, Klaus said. And then Olaf's laughing and he's like, how do you like them apples? And that exact thing is what they use the exact dialogue. And then it goes through this whole page, and the next page, every single thing that each of them says, they used it word for word.
Yeah, and that's actually something that I really liked in the show. Like, there's actually times that where it came pretty vividly to where when I was thinking back of like when I was reading the books a couple years ago, I was like, that sounds pretty like to the beat like of the dialogue in the book. So that's why like it's a very minimal critique on the show. Like, yeah, it did become a bother sometimes, not all the time, but I did appreciate that they were mostly sticking to the source material, and they didn't really stray from that. So something that we definitely have to get into in regards to the TV show. What did you think about the casting and the portrayal of how they did it on the screen versus how they were in the book?
Olaf being
Neil Patrick Harris.
Yeah, I thought that was perfect. Like I thought, like sometimes, like there was more comedy in it than in the book. I feel like, but
I don't think so. Honestly,
you know,
I think
it's just the way I read it in my head.
No, and I think that's where another thing comes down to, like memory and nostalgia. Like I think in our heads when we read these books as kids, and like preteens and like that era, I really think in our heads we made it more dark than it actually was. Like when I reread them, I think that's why. So it was for books 1, 2, and 4 that I gave 3 stars to, and a reason that stands out to me that I gave it 3 stars is because I was like, these feel a bit more. Sounds a little mean, but it feels like more childish than what I remember. Like it didn't really feel like books that were aimed more towards like teenagers. And then that's when I realized like those books weren't made for teenagers. And it's kind of like with the whole J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter series. I think she started learning that the readers that she was directing her writing towards, they were growing up, and so she started like maturing like the storylines. And I think that's what happened with this book series. So honestly, I think they really hit it on the head with the comedy and the balance between that and like how dark it got.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job in the show as well. Just my brain exactly was like that, where I felt like anytime I was reading what Lemony was saying, I was like, oh, this is a terrible story. Oh, this is a sad story. And so I always just thought the whole thing, you know. And then now that you see Olaf and how he acts, you're like, okay, that makes more sense now that we're adults. It's like, oh yeah, like he has reasons the way he's being, and he's not just like the bad guy that I felt when I was reading it originally. So I like how you could feel the difference by watching it, how they did it.
I think the casting was really perfect. So I think they chose the correct people. So like thinking back on like the whole Jim Carrey one, that one was like flat out like, this is kind of like a comedy. It wasn't dark, and I actually remember liking that one a lot. But this one, for some reason I felt like a little iffy when I read Neil Patrick Harris, because when I read the name, like what's the first thing that comes to mind is How I Met Your Mother, for me at least. And so like I love that show. Barney's one of my favorite characters. Neil Patrick Harris is like one of the best actors in that show. So when they announced it, I was like, that's a little weird. But then like actually watching it from the first episode, I was like, okay, that's perfect casting. Honestly, he hit really good points when it came down to the dark stuff, the humor, and all that. In regards to the other characters, I think that they chose really good actors too for the kids. Like, no doubt, like they did what they could. That's kind of like where it goes back into like my critique of how like they delivered their lines. I feel like when it came down to the adults, like they hit it pretty well, but the kids were like, it felt more forced that they were talking unnaturally compared to the adults, but that's fine. When it comes down to the casting for Lemony Snicket, I think it's Patrick Warburton. I'm probably butchering his last name. I actually really liked him. So like
a good narrator voice.
Yeah, he has like that distinctive voice. Even though there's times where like I really try to like stifle a laugh because like I always think of like Kronk from Emperor's New Groove. But yeah, he did an awesome job, like especially in the last season when it came down to like the darker stuff with like his backstory and why he's following like the 3 orphans. Like he did a really good job, and like that was actually like that was one thing that the Netflix show definitely could have gotten wrong. I really do feel like that they did it perfectly to where he just made it, because it's either hit or miss, and honestly they hit it every single time. So I'm really glad with that casting. One of the last topics that we're gonna talk about, we're gonna get into our thoughts on the differences between the book and the Netflix series and how we thought it impacted the overall show.
So I'm just gonna share one example of that, and for me, it was the hook-handed man and the way that they talked about him in the last couple, like starting with the 10th book. So it just goes into more of stuff about him, like he has more dialogue than he does in the book, and I think that it works well in the movie, or I mean the TV show, to do that, just so that it can kind of lead up to the other episodes and kind of make sense to where he's going. And when we were reading it in the book,
it doesn't really get into that.
It kind of barely does a little bit in the Grim Grotto, but it doesn't do it before that. And so I found that interesting when we were watching. I was like, wow, they're like really having him do more stuff. But I do think that it worked well to do that.
Yeah, and without going into too many spoilers, honestly, with all 3 seasons, they actually do a lot more backstory with side and small characters. So like they go way more into like Jock Snicket, Kit Snicket, the henchman for Count Olaf, like the hook-handed man. Not so much like the other ones, like the twins. You can't tell if it's a man or a woman, or the really tall bald dude. They don't really go into like that deep, but they do go into it enough to where you're like, I appreciate that they go into more depth with the TV show. And again, like with all these differences that we're like listing out, it never diminishes like the source material. I really feel like it more enhances it, like it makes it a whole lot better. And I think that's a really big plus for readers who are like in love with the series and just wanted a really good show. Because honestly, for me, when I watched like the Nickelodeon movie, I wanted, even though it wasn't the best, and I really liked it mostly because I was a kid, I really wanted them to make more of them. And that's why I'm really glad that they made the TV show, because I think with that aspect at least, it was really good.
Yeah, I think it was much better for them to have done it as a series rather than trying to do like a movie with 2 books at a time or stuff like that, since the other movie had 3 in 1. So I think it worked best so that you could get enough content by doing it as a series.
And this is probably the last difference that we're going to go into. And again, big kind of spoiler warning. We're not going to go into specifics, but we're going to go into like the idea of behind the like spoilers, I guess. So the biggest difference between the show and the books, if you were anything like me reading the books, by the end of the 13th one, even though I overall rated it a 5 stars because I love the series, I just appreciate how much it grew. I remember fondly being super frustrated, not getting all the answers. So Lemony Snicket, he had the habit of opening up storylines in every single book, and as the books progressed, they almost always closed off the storylines, but then he left a lot of them, well, not even a lot, but like big enough ones to where you're like, what was the point of bringing this up in the book if you're not going to answer them? They did answer at least my questions when I was done reading the books. So they do go into the TV show, what happens with like the Quagmires. They close off that storyline, and probably the biggest thing that I remember readers being interested in is what in the crap was in the freaking sugar bowl. Again, we're not going to go into what was in the sugar bowl, but they do go into it and they do reveal what's inside of it. What did you think with like them closing off the storylines? I remember you said that, I think it was right after the very last episode had ended, I remember you said something like, I wonder if they made this up for the show, or if Lemony Snicket, the author of the books, like had any say in regards to like into the show.
Yeah, and because I assume that when, like, if it were me and I wrote something and I wanted to share it like in a video format, that they would run their ideas by me and I would approve them. And if they were to be like, hey, we're gonna say what's in the sugar bowl and we're just gonna say it was this, is that okay? Like, yeah. I would probably just be like, no. Let me just tell you what my intentions were with that, and you can use it, and you can tell them, and it can be totally canon and everything. So I'm assuming that is what they did, because I feel like with most crossovers from book to film, that they would have like a lot of say in what their book ends up looking like in the end.
Because big reveal right here. I don't know if you guys know, but Lemony Snicket's not his real name. So it's Lemony Snicket is a pseudonym for Dan Handler. Is that his real name? I think it's Dan Handler. I'm pretty positive in the opening credits that it says that Dan Handler and Lemony Snicket are both executive producers. Again, don't quote me on that. I know that he most likely is probably a producer though. So I'm pretty sure that he did have a say in regards to like the differences that they added in and with like the storylines that they closed off. So I really did appreciate. So if any of you guys read the books and you do feel like that frustration that you didn't get all the answers, honestly, looking into it a little bit more, not a whole lot, but just a little bit more, I think you'll be satisfied with how many answers that they gave you. And even with the very last scene, I reread like the last part in the book, and it's not in there, but they did it to a point to where they more enhanced what was in the book rather than diminish what was in the source material.
And then it helped end the season well to add that scene. It made it feel like it was over in the series.
Yeah, because we didn't really mention this, but each book is 2 episodes per season. The last book, though, with it being one of the biggest ones, they only did it in 1 episode, which I thought I would be a little disappointed. But I think with the penultimate peril, so the 12th book, they extended that enough to the point to where at the end of the first part, you're like, well, there's only like 10, 15 pages left of the book. What are they going to do? And those are actually one of the best episodes. So the last 3 episodes are some of the best. I think they combined the last 2 books and they morphed it to where, again, it's not anything wrong against the source material, but to where it's just really good. It's good stuff. So closing off our video, we do just want to give some last thoughts in what we feel towards the books and what we feel towards the Netflix adaptation, and whether or not we liked it, which I think you guys already know if we did or not.
Yep, I liked the books and I liked the series. I'm not particularly picky when it comes to these kind of things. I have a really hard time giving like actual ratings, so I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna say that I loved the books when I was a kid, and so I'm always gonna love them, even if rereading them changed some little bits of opinions here and there. It does not change the overall feeling for me. And same with the TV show. Once I got over like little nitpicky differences and the way that they were going with it, I realized that it is really good for what it is, and that if you've never read the books before, it tells the story just perfectly the way that it needed to, so that you can understand what was going on and you didn't feel like you were missing anything. If anything, you learned more, so like we just said from the end. So. Yep,
and I'm the same exact way. I didn't really grow up with the book series. Like I have memories of like them being gifted to me reading them, not necessarily finishing them, but I do hold it pretty close to me to where I appreciate what the stories did, because I absolutely love how Lemony Snicket integrated how he wrote the book, because like it really made you feel like these characters might be real. He's probably on a real investigation for these orphans, and it makes you feel so much in the story. And for the Netflix adaptation, I really love what it did. I feel like it didn't change so much the source material, but ultimately it just enhanced it. And if you love the book series, you're absolutely going to love the Netflix series. So we both urge that you guys go watch them. I think it'll be a whole lot of fun. Alright, thank you guys so much for tuning into our new series. This is, again, a series where we're going to be comparing our favorite books with our favorite adaptations, whether it be a TV series or movies. We look forward to making more of these. So let us know if you guys have any recommendations on stuff that you want us to read or watch, and we'll definitely be interested in looking into those. Alright guys, thanks again. This has been Ocean's Books.
And stuff.
Bye guys.
See ya.